In 1939, TWA, pushed hard by its major stockholder, a young Howard Hughes, walked into Lockheed and asked for something no manufacturer had ever built before: a 40-passenger airliner that could fly coast to coast, nonstop, well beyond anything in Lockheed's existing lineup. Nobody in that room could have known it yet, but they had just set in motion one of the most beautiful, most record-breaking, and most maintenance-punishing airplanes in aviation history. What Lockheed handed back wasn't just an answer to that request, it was a leap. The Constellation became the first airliner family built from the ground up around a pressurized cabin, letting it climb above the weather that grounded lesser aircraft. It cruised near 340 miles an hour, topped out over 375. Triple tail, dolphin-curved fuselage, a shape that made every other airliner on the ramp look like it was still figuring out what an airplane was supposed to look like. Airlines around the world wanted it: TWA, Pan Am, Eastern, Air France, BOAC, KLM, Qantas. The roster reads like a who's who of golden age aviation. And yet, behind that gorgeous silhouette was one of the most punishing maintenance burdens the airline industry had ever taken on. Picture a mechanic at a TWA hangar at 2 in the morning, staring up at an engine cowling he's already pulled off twice that week. He's not chasing a mystery. He knows exactly what's wrong. He just doesn't have the part. And even if he did, this particular curve of fuselage skin doesn't match the last one he patched. Every panel on this airplane is its own puzzle. That wasn't an exaggeration. That was Tuesday. This is the story of why. But greatness like that doesn't come free. It comes financed by complexity, and complexity is exactly what the maintenance crews inherited. Start with the fuselage itself. That dolphin shape wasn't just a styling choice. It was a continuously changing profile, bulkhead after bulkhead, with no two shaped the same. Beautiful to look at, a nightmare to build, and worse to repair. If a section of skin got damaged, there was no such thing as a standard patch. Every single repair was a custom job, built to fit that one unique curve in that one unique spot. The rest of the industry took note. Later generations of airliners moved to simple tube-shaped fuselages, precisely because a cylindrical body is cheaper to build, easier to repair, and handles the stress of pressurization far more predictably. The Constellation taught that lesson the hard way, one custom patch at a time. Then there were the engines. 4 Wright R-3350 duplex cyclones, 18 cylinders each, air-cooled, pushing over 3,000 horsepower per engine in the later Super Constellation. These engines ran hot, not occasionally, but constantly, especially on long oceanic legs at sustained high power. Cylinder heads cracked, valves failed, carburetors caught fire. Oil consumption had to be watched on every single flight like a patient in intensive care. And remember, this wasn't one engine to babysit, it was 4 on every aircraft, with every one of them a potential point of failure over open ocean, hundreds of miles from anywhere to land. That risk wasn't theoretical. In June of 1946, an Atlantic Clipper Constellation carrying Laurence, Olivier, and Vivien Leigh had an engine catch fire over Connecticut and literally tear free of the wing mid-flight. The crew pulled off a wheels-up emergency landing with no loss of life. Genuinely heroic flying. But that flight wasn't a freak accident. It was the 3rd serious incident in the Constellation's first 10 months of service, and it was enough for the government to do something it had never done before: ground an entire fleet of a major airliner nationwide. That grounding lasted more than 5 weeks. The engines got fixed, or at least managed, but managed is the operative word, not solved.
Even the parts of the Constellation that looked purely cosmetic came with hidden costs. That triple tail wasn't just there to look distinctive, it let the aircraft fit inside existing hangars built for smaller planes, a clever, practical solution. But it also meant 3 vertical stabilizers, 3 sets of control surfaces, 3 times the inspection and lubrication work on every single turnaround, instead of 1. And then there was pressurization itself, the very feature that made the Constellation revolutionary. Flying above the weather was a genuine breakthrough for passenger comfort and safety, but pressurized flight was brand new territory for the entire airline industry in the mid-1940s. Seals, valves, differential pressure controls, none of it existed in most maintenance manuals yet, because most aircraft before the Constellation had never needed them. Airlines weren't just learning to fly a new plane, they were learning an entirely new discipline of aircraft maintenance in real time on live passenger routes. All of this added up to a simple, brutal truth. The Constellation didn't just require a mechanic, it required infrastructure, specialized tooling to work that curved fuselage, dedicated overhaul shops built specifically for the R-3350, crews trained in pressurization systems most of the industry hadn't touched before. The big airlines could afford to build that infrastructure, and largely their Constellations flew well because of it. Smaller operators weren't so lucky. Without deep pockets and dedicated technical departments, they found themselves grounding aircraft for weeks at a time, waiting on parts that simply weren't sitting on any shelf. And Lockheed didn't let the airlines catch their breath. The Constellation kept evolving. The original L049, then the L649, the L749, the stretched L1049 Super Constellation, and finally the L1649 Starliner with a completely new wing. Every new variant brought real performance gains. It also meant mechanics who just mastered one version had to essentially start over on the next because parts and procedures didn't carry cleanly from one model to the other. Even the fixes brought new problems. The turbo compound version of the R-3350, introduced on the Super Constellation, added power recovery turbines, 3 per engine, that captured wasted exhaust energy and fed it back into the crankshaft. It was genuinely brilliant engineering, boosting both power and fuel efficiency on long routes. It was also one more intricate system that had to be understood, calibrated, and repaired by hand. And when it failed in ways that were both expensive and at times dangerous. Here's what's worth remembering, though. None of this makes the Constellation a bad airplane. Quite the opposite. In 1944, a Constellation piloted by Howard Hughes himself flew coast to coast from Burbank to Washington in under 7 hours, averaging over 330 miles an hour, a stunning number for the era. In 1957, a Super Constellation flew Los Angeles to London non-stop in just over 18 hours, a record for the longest non-stop passenger flight ever flown by a piston airliner. Those records still stand as proof the Constellation wasn't struggling to keep up with its era, it was flying years ahead of it. And that's really the whole story. The maintenance burden wasn't a design flaw so much as it was the cost of ambition. Lockheed built an airplane that outran what the industry knew how to support, and the gap between what the Constellation could do and what a hangar crew could keep running never fully closed. It took jet airliners, the Boeing 707, the Douglas DC-8, the de Havilland Comet, to finally make the Constellation's problems obsolete rather than solved. Jets had a fraction of the moving parts of a radial piston engine. The maintenance nightmare that had defined 2 decades of Constellation operations simply evaporated with the new technology. The last scheduled Constellation passenger flight in the United States touched down in 1967. Today, only a handful still fly, kept airworthy by museums and preservation societies pouring resources into an airplane that once demanded exactly that kind of devotion from airlines under brutal schedule pressure. Except now it's done purely out of love. The Lockheed Constellation was never really a disaster. It was a triumph that happened to arrive faster than the world's ability to maintain it. And honestly, that might be an even better story than if it had simply worked. Thanks for watching. If you want more deep dives into the aircraft that pushed aviation forward, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.